Here's the truth. You have absolutely zero chance of getting through the SAT grammar section if you don't understand the punctuation that's actually on the test. And I know this to be true. In fact, I recently had a student who was terrible at SAT grammar before, but after actually learning how SAT punctuation works, he ended up getting a 780 on the reading and writing section of the December SAT. You know who you are. Comment if you want everyone else to know too. In this video, I'm going to show you every single piece of punctuation you need to understand if you want to do well on the SAT and what each one means. After watching this video, I can basically guarantee that you're going to understand all the different punctuation you'll see on the SAT and probably get through most grammar questions pretty easily. Now, the first thing we have here is a period. I'll be honest, if you've made it through 15 plus years of life and you still do not know what a period is, you might be kind of cooked, but I'll explain it anyways. Periods are for ending sentences. If you don't know what a sentence is, again, you might kind of be cooked, but essentially it's a phrase like this that's just a complete thought that ends at the end. A period is used to end a sentence. When a period is shown, that means the current sentence is over and a new sentence is about to begin. That is always the case. There's no other situation in which you're going to have to use periods on the SAT, so keep that in mind. This example down here is not a sentence because they just say because I was tired. That is not a full complete thought. It's saying because I was tired, so what? Like, then what happens? And now onto commas. This is really the big one. If you thought periods are easy, this will not be easy. The first thing commas do is pretty simple. Lists. You can separate 3 or more different things by using commas. I bought apples, bananas, and grapes. I watched Skibbity Toilet Reels, 6-7 Reels, and Quandale Dingle Reels. That's the kind of stuff that I want to watch, and lists can be used to separate them. The important thing to know is that you must put a comma before the and at the end. So there's always going to be an and at the end, and a comma has to go before it. But then what about a comma plus a fanboys? Fanboys are the words for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Now these have a very important usage because these are used to separate an independent clause and then another independent clause. Now, if you're curious what an independent clause means, first of all, I have a video that explains all of that. But if you just want a quick refresher, an independent clause is essentially a clause that can exist entirely on its own. You don't need anything else for an independent clause to make it work. So for example, if you look back on here, my SAT was finished. That is a completely fine independent clause on its own. You don't need anything else for that to work. But because I was tired, that's a dependent clause. It's not fully fine on its own. You need something else for that sentence to work. So if you have 2 different independent clauses, you can use a comma plus a fanboys word to separate them. I wanted to go, but I stayed home. She studied hard for the SAT, so she got a 1560. Both of these are independent clauses, and both of these are independent clauses as well. Introductory phrases. You'll often see sentences where they start out by providing some kind of context about the sentence, and then they go ahead and actually say what happens in the sentence. An introductory phrase must be set off by a comma. After dinner, we watched one of John's SAT videos. Yes, I agree. In case you're wondering, this is essentially a separation between a dependent clause and then also an independent clause. The dependent clause is the introductory phrase, the independent clause is the rest of the stuff. Then we have non-essential information. Non-essential information is information that again provides some kind of extra context about the sentence, but the important thing is that it is literally non-essential. You do not need it in order for existence. Kind of like the 6-7 meme. We do not need that to exist, yet it does anyways. My brother, who lives in Japan, is visiting soon. We can just eliminate this whole thing and say my brother is visiting soon. That makes grammatical sense and logical sense, so it's fine. But look at this sentence. The man whose car was stolen was found outside Waffle House. We actually cannot eliminate the whose car is stolen part, because if we just eliminate this, all we have left is the man was found outside the Waffle House. We have no idea which man it was. Was it my brother? Was it the guy outside of Wendy's? Was it Quandale Dingle? Like, which man was it? The whose car is stolen part is actually important because we need to know the type of man it was. It was the man whose car was recently stolen, and he was found outside a Waffle House. This is why non-essential information is a little bit tricky, so definitely do some more practice on this. And finally, we just have adjectives describing a main noun. So if you say it's something like, it was a long, exhausting day, you can use a comma between the long and exhausting part. The way to know if you can use a comma in this situation is to think to yourself, can you technically separate the two by and? It was a long and exhausting day. Therefore, we can use a comma to separate it as well. Now, I know there was a bunch of different stuff I just went over there, but the thing is, after you do enough of these practice problems, it will just become ingrained in your brain like Skibbity Toilet Brain Rot is. You're not going to need to memorize every single one of these rules because eventually you just start kind of feeling it. And the best students that I know, the students who actually get like above a 700 in the reading and writing section, they're not memorizing a list of grammar rules. They just understand the grammar rules so well that they don't even need to see a list. They just understand it and they can get it right just by looking at the questions. Onto the semicolon. This is actually even easier than the comma, believe it or not. Semicolons are used for separating independent clauses from each other, kind of similar to the comma plus fanboys that we talked about before. It's actually basically the exact same. So if I said, I love writing, it helps me think clearly. Both of these are independent clauses. Both of them could exist entirely on their own, but we just use a semicolon here because we're feeling a little bit zesty on this sentence. But unfortunately, there is another thing, complex lists. These are essentially a multi-version of the list we talked about here. So imagine if you had a list like this, but there's actually a comma within each of the things in the list. It's like a list inside a list, essentially. If you do that, you can't just use commas to separate them because then it's just going to get confusing, like which commas for which. So then you have to upgrade to a semicolon to separate them, you see. And so you can see an example of that for this sentence here. The responsibilities of the new intern include organizing the files, which are currently in disarray, answering phone calls, ensuring proper message delivery, and assisting with presentations, preparing visual aids and handouts. The different things at the list here are include organizing the files, which are currently in disarray. Then the second thing is answering phone calls, ensuring proper message delivery. And the third thing is assisting with presentations, preparing visual aids and handouts. Those are the three different things. But it doesn't even need to be that big brain. Like, look at this sentence. Me and bro took a trip to Paris, France, Zurich, Switzerland, and Munich, Germany. We're just listing different city names, and so we have to use a comma to separate the city name from the country name, and we can use semicolons to separate the things so it doesn't get confusing. The big way to know if this is a complex list is if you see a semicolon followed by and in the sentence. That's that, telltale sign. It's kind of like the smell of stale pepperoni in the school cafeteria. You know it's the school cafeteria because you smell that stale pepperoni, and therefore you know what to do. Colons. We're not talking about the bodily organ here. We're actually talking about these two dots. They are also very simple. But the main idea behind colons is that you need an independent clause before the colon and then just something afterwards. It could be an independent clause, it could be a dependent clause, it could be your mom, it doesn't really matter. But you need an independent clause beforehand. She brought three things, a pen, a notebook, and a dream. He had one goal, success. But then think about this thing after the colon. The thing after the colon has to be something that's elaborating on the last thing said before the colon. So it says she brought three things. The things that she brought were a pen, a notebook, and a dream. He had one goal, success. Now it doesn't have to be just the last word, but just the last idea described in the independent clause. The big way you know if it's a colon versus something else is if you can definitely notice that there is some kind of continuation of thought, if there's some kind of elaboration on what was said before. But what about dashes? My dog, the one that hates baths, jumped into the lake. The idea behind dashes is that you're just breaking off some kind of non-essential information. Yes, this is non-essential information, just like with the commas before. But the big thing here is that it's more abrupt. It's a big shift in the whole sentence. Wow, this is something crazy that's happening, and they just want to throw it in there through this. The big thing to remember is that there must be a dash both before the non-essential information and then also afterwards. If there's only one before, you're kind of cooked. Just give up at that point because does not make any sense at all. You need one both before and after it in order to make it right. I did want to include here though, parentheses. 6-7, the big new meme, has destroyed the very fabric of society. For all intents and purposes, this is essentially the exact same as a dash. But it is slightly less abrupt. If I say the big new meme in these parentheses, it just kind of feels a little bit less abrupt than if I say the one that hates bats. That feels like a huge shift in everything. Whereas the parentheses is just okay, you can read this, you can not, who really cares? So it's less abrupt, but you probably will not even see this on the SAT, I'll be honest. I have this handy dandy diagram here that shows you separations between independent clauses and also independent clauses and dependent clauses. The things that can separate two independent clauses are a period, a semicolon, or a comma followed by fanboys. For an independent clause and dependent clause, it can only be a comma or literally nothing. If there's no separation, that could also theoretically work. Colons, dashes, and parentheses are a little bit different. They can kind of be used for either of the two categories, so I didn't really want to put them in any single one. But this should hopefully help you as well if you're struggling to remember all this stuff. So now you know all the different types of punctuation you might see on the SAT. Let's actually practice with some of this crap. What I want you to do is pause the video and then complete the problem yourself. It's extremely boring and not helpful at all to just be watching me solve the problem. It's like watching your bro play video games. It is not exciting, he is not making it exciting, and you just don't want to be there. You gotta actually try out the problems for yourself to make this fun. Okay, so historians generally agree the printer Elizabeth Glover played a crucial role in early American publishing. Blank, within a year of arriving in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, she established the first printing press in British North America. So I can tell that there's definitely a complete thought both before the blank and also after the blank. There's nothing that feels unresolved there. So there's an independent clause before and after. So immediately we know it cannot be A for that reason, because commas are only for independent clauses and dependent clauses. So which one of these? It can't be B because there's a dash here and we don't have any other dash in the sentence. Remember, there has to be a dash both before and after the thing that's being separated. So now we just got these two here. The real question we have to ask ourselves is it a colon? Because if it is kind of an elaboration on the thing before, you would use the colon. If not, it's going to be a semicolon. And in fact, it appears that it is an elaboration. It's saying that she played a crucial role in American publishing. It explains essentially why she did. She literally made the first printing press in British North America. That had to be like really good or something. It's got to be like the equivalent of like creating Minecraft or something. Therefore, D probably is going to be the answer. It is the answer. I don't really know why I said that. So the big thing to remember, is it an elaboration on what was said before? If yes, then it likely is going to be a colon. Geophysicist Marcia McNutt, recounts in her memoir the moment she first descended into the Mariana Trench, describing the submersible blank as a fragile soap bubble drifting through midnight. A metaphor shows and convey both the machine's vulnerability and its grace. Honestly, she's doing too much there, but let's talk about what this actually means. So we have a dash both before and after. So it would not really make sense to have another dash in the thing. Like, it's just way too much dashes at that point. Like, having a third dash, that's just kind of weird. So it's between A and D here. A bath escape scarcely wider than a minivan. So we really have to think for ourselves, if there's a comma before here, we're essentially treating this as non-essential information, the scarcely wider than a minivan part. So let's think to ourselves, can we eliminate this and still have the sentence make sense? In the Mariana Trench, describing the submersible, a bath escape, as a fragile. Okay, so that doesn't really make sense. Like what is a bath escape? I mean, I have no idea what that is, but I think you probably need this extra part to make sense of what she's trying to say. Like, even though she is definitely like doing too much here, you need like all the information to at least kind of make sense of it. So I'm going to go for A as being wrong and that B is the correct answer, which it is. There's no non-essential information here because you cannot eliminate anything and have it still make sense. The fossil record charts both the rapid diversification of life and blank. Paleontologists may detect mass extinction events by noting sudden gaps in species prevalence. So let's just look here. I can definitely feel the fossil record shows the rapid diversification of life and its occasional collapse. So if you include the its occasional collapse part, this is definitely an independent clause before, and then also is definitely an independent clause after it. So what do we do now? We have to find which ones can apply to this. A cannot apply because you cannot just separate two independent clauses with nothing. B also does not work because which is not one of the fanboys' words. And even if it was, you would also need a comma here to make that work. C is not it because, again, commas alone cannot work. You need a fanboys in order to separate the two. But D can work because it is a semicolon. Internet culture has been around for decades. Skibbity Riz is blank. The world of the 1990s never could have expected the destruction that Skibbity Riz and his followers have caused. So this is kind of a weird example, I will be honest. The first thing we know is that it's an independent clause both before and after the blank. Skibbity Riz is different, and the world of the 1990s never could have expected. Those are both independent clauses, or at least the full thing here would be an independent clause. So therefore, we know it has to be a semicolon, because that's the only ones of the choices that can work. So C and D is immediately out. So how do we choose between A and B? Well, here's a very simple rule that you can use whenever you see a question like this. If a semicolon is after the transition word, the first part of the second sentence must be conflicting with the earlier sentence. So Skibbity Riz is different, must be conflicting with internet culture has been around for decades. But if the semicolon is before the word however, then the second half of the second sentence is conflicting with the first sentence. So you see, this second half of the second sentence would have to be conflicting with the first sentence here. And this really does make sense because when you say the word however, it like kind of introduces that, okay, something is different here. Like something is different that's happening. It's conflicting with what was said before. So since Skibbity Riz is different, is conflicting with internet culture has been around for decades, we know the answer has to be A. Let's ace this next SAT.
This had SAT, yeah, it's pretty mean. Trying to judge my whole life off a test on the screen. One shot, one run, no pause to rewind. If I panic, I'm done. If I trust, I'll be fine. Yeah, this SAT got my chest on freeze. Every second on the clock, trying to cut through me. But I've been grinding all week, now it's test a day beat. If the curve's trying to kill me, I'm a die.